This is my best kind of show notes. We didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Like Scooby-Doo.
Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is it not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is a JAFFE. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
did I do that?
You're insane!
Well, hello everybody. Hope you are well. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Daily Time. It's actually 3 a.m. in the morning, South African time. And it feels like it's 3 a.m. in the morning, South African time. I just got back from South Africa. I just flew in from South Africa, and boy, are my arms tired. I had to get used to my little rig, my music, my lights. I didn't have any of this in South Africa. I was just, using the MacBook Pro, and it worked. It worked well, although I'm very grateful for connectivity. Anna Bowman is here, and she says, welcome back to the US&A. Of course, how could I miss it? How could I miss it? Especially with a guest like I have today. And Cyrus has just sent a nondescript YouTube. I'm not even sure what that means, Cyrus. Is that the YouTube of this show? Yes. Please watch it. I'm glad you are watching tonight. And as I said, an amazing, amazing guest. Well, let's get into it. Today is Trust Your Instinct Day. Trust Your Instinct Day. I get it, Cyrus. 3 a.m. 3 a.m. Eternal. I get it. Okay. Got it. Good. So Trust Your Instinct Day. This has been a really great common theme, I think, throughout this series of interviews, this idea of gut and instinct and intuition. And I wonder what my guest today thinks about that too, about the idea of gut and instinct and intuition. What does his instinct say about the future of experience and the experience economy? Well, we'll get to him in a moment, but just to reflect on the week that was in South Africa, Adam Pierno, DC Crenshaw, Kate O'Neill, and Andy Henriquez, and of course the debut of my mom on the show. But this week, it is an all-star lineup. Joe Pine, Natalie Nixon, Anne Handley, and Bob Berg back in CT, Connecticut, not Cape Town. I've got to tell you, Joe Pine wrote a book called The Experience Economy, amongst others. This book it's not seminal, it's meta-seminal. It transcends seminal. It's uber seminal. The concept of the experience economy, not just what it is and what it represents and what it means, but when it was written, how visionary and ahead of its time it was. And we're going to talk to him all about that, what's changed, what hasn't, the events of the past 12, 13, 14, 15 months. What does the future of the experience economy look like? Does it involve cryptocurrency? Does it involve creator coins? I would say the answer has to be yes. Priceless experience, assets. It's got to be a part of that. And I would love to hear his thoughts on that as well. The JAFFE coin sitting at around $3.50. And one of the most amazing things about this whole creator economy is if you look down, you will see those weekly rally rewards already today, just 2 days after they were reset. $7,200 equivalent will be spread to every single holder of JAFFE coin. The entire economy rises together. Well, we're going to do some very quick birthdays. Livia Blanchard, Mark Bartros. This was over the weekend. Jane Condon and Joe Polizzi, two previous guests on the show, Mr. Dave Peck, Mr. Rail Levitt, and then on LinkedIn, Angus Nelson, former guest on the show. You're a guest on the show. You get the magenta treatment. Janik Mehta, Ali Mansfield, Joe Ruder. Happy birthday to all of you. Well, let's get into our seated soliloquy today. And the seated soliloquy, not surprisingly, and absolutely connected to my guest, is called Experience. So I hope you get to experience the soliloquy today. My guest today, Joe Pine, author of The Experience Economy, proudly owns and uses a hard copy edition of the Oxford English Dictionary. I, however, will cite Wikipedia, of course I will, for their definition of the word experience. At least that way, we get an expert critique or concurrence from Joe. Here's the definition. Experience is the process through which conscious organisms perceive the world around them. Experiences can be accompanied by active awareness on the part of the person having the experience, although they need not be. Okay, that was a little meta even for me, although it does support my son's belief that we're all part of a simulation. Virtual reality aside, the key word that pops out for me is the word perceive. Perception is reality, as the old marketing saying goes. The thing about perception is that it is highly personal and subjective. Not that it always needs to be, but at the most simplistic and individual level, it is absolutely subjective. So much so that two people consuming the exact same product or service at the exact same time could have two polar opposite experiences. Experiences are very much connected to expectation, and expectations themselves are a product of two dimensions: the past, as in your past experiences, and the future, anticipated experiences. They meet in the middle, and it is at this point where delivery either does not meet, does meet, or even exceeds expectations. This entire approach is often mapped to a customer journey, but the journey in question is two-dimensional, linear, and somewhat predictable. To bring it to life, we need a third dimension, and that depth, if you will, comes from the notion of experiential. Often synonymous with events, and these days not necessarily limited to predominantly physical or IRL. As many of you will have heard from me in the past, experience is the E in PBEC, product, brand, experience, and community. It is the very inverse or corollary of brand, insofar that it is decidedly customer-centric. It's all about how the brand and the product or the service or offering fits into your customer's life, as opposed to the other way around. How it adds value, how it makes their life better, how it delivers utility. That is the essence of experience. So perhaps it's time to add a new dimension to the way that we look at experiences. Instead of a binary good or bad, what if we added different, unique, or even transcendent? Well, I hope this show and all my shows deliver and continue to over-deliver just that for you. Daily experiences in hope, positivity, and optimism. And now, the epitome of hope, positivity, and optimism, we're going to talk to the author of The Experience Economy, Joe Pine. A little bit of background for you on Joe. It's just a brief bio. B. Joseph Pine II is an internationally acclaimed author, speaker, and management advisor. Among his many appearances, Joe has spoken at the World Economic Forum in Davos, at TED in California, South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Joe specializes in helping people see the world of business differently through his many groundbreaking books, beginning with the award-winning Mass customization, the new frontier in business competition, authenticity, what consumers really want, and infinite possibility, creating customer value on the digital frontier. He's most well known, however, for his best-selling book, The Experience Economy, Work is Theater and Every Business a Stage, which recently was named one of the 100 best business books of all time by 800 CEO Read. And in 2020, The Experience Economy was re-released in hardcover with a new preview on competing for customer time, attention, and money. And before we bring him on, I would like you to please watch this.
More companies are in fact being in the experience business. More and more companies are staging experiences and gaining greater economic value.
When you stage an experience, that you need to embrace a new business model, and that is that work is theater.
See, that's the abridged version. And then we,
I look so young in those pictures. Wow.
yeah, but young and less experienced. How about that?
That's right. I'm much more experienced now.
So Joe Pine, the crowds are going wild for you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is mine. Dave Schneider says, one of the most profound books to impact my orientation of marketing in the past decade. And we certainly are going to talk about that in depth. But, you know, you're a bit of a visionary when you think about some of these other books that you've written. I think we can get to them in a moment. But first, you know, we sent our detectives into the field to find out about the real Joe Pine. And we found some shocking truths. And I'm setting myself up to fail, aren't I? First of all, here's what we found. We found out that you're guest number 250.
All right.
So, I mean, a quarter, I mean, it's amazing. I've been doing this since March of 2020. This is a milestone for me. That's why I could not just come home after a 30-hour door-to-door trip and go straight to sleep, especially when I knew who my guest was. But here's what we found about you in our segment that we call Fun Facts. Well, first of all, this is what we found out. Now, this just confounds me. How can you be a fan of the Yankees, Packers, and Lakers? How can you do that?
I moved around a lot as a kid, right? So I became a Yankees fan when I lived in New Jersey, a Lakers fan when I lived in California, and then we moved to Minnesota, where I'm at now for most of the last 50 years. And I hated the move from Palo Alto, California to Minnesota. So it was right before football season. I said, I'm not rooting for these stupid Minnesota Vikings. I hate Minnesota. Who's their arch rival? It was the Packers. It was, all right, I'm a Packer fan.
So as you can see, look, I think you look great, although maybe just one or two, less beers. That's the only thing I would say.
Maybe, yes.
Although you are number one. So here's what else we found out about you, which I did mention in the soliloquy, is you proudly own a hard copy edition of the Oxford English Dictionary, and you use it. I think it's important to, right now my laptop is my rig is balancing on two shoeboxes, Nike shoeboxes, but you don't use the dictionary as a shoebox or as a,
No.
so tell us about why this is so important to you that you want to share it.
Well, words have always been important to me, the definitions of it. I still remember when we lived in Palo Alto, my dad took me to visit a lawyer friend of his in the city of San Francisco. And like you walk in the door and there's this bookcase and it's Oxford English dictionaries, right? And I had heard of them. I'd never seen one. So when they were talking or whatever, I just sat there and browsed the dictionary, right? Okay, so I admit it, I was a nerd. I was a nerd in a lot of different ways, right? And it was just wonderful. So I said, I have to have one someday. And so I've got one. It's on my hallway shelf right over here. And so it is important when looking up new concepts, and all of our frameworks in that is one of the first things I do is look up the definitions of words. It's particularly important with authenticity. Like what is the heck does authenticity mean, and what are all the synonyms and all the synonyms of inauthenticity and so forth. And one of the things I found out is there's just most all words that mean authentic, right, outside of fake and phony, are the negatives of positive words that mean authentic. So it's just sort of a weird phenomena. And so it's just very important whenever thinking about something new is to look it up. And so you see a quote or a dictionary definition of anything I do, almost always it's the Oxford English Dictionary.
I actually, I don't use the physical dictionary, but I love going and looking at definitions and then being able to pick out one word within the words that pops. And that's exactly what I did this time using Wikipedia, the word perception,
Right.
which we could probably come back to in a moment. But I remember another one, for example, was the definition of creativity. And I saw Jeremy Chrisman says words matter. They certainly
Exactly.
do. So one of the definitions of creativity is productive originality. And so I looked at that and I said, productive originality. So productive productivity to get a result, originality doing something differently. Wait a second, doing something differently to get a result, as opposed to doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And then I realized creativity, is in fact the antidote to insanity. And suddenly it became like this juxtaposition of innovation, and creativity juxtaposed against status quo. And it was all just from looking at what is often a boring definition.
Right. You should bring that up again tomorrow with Natalie Nixon. I know her and her focus on creativity. So I think that would help spark that conversation as well.
As long as she doesn't say you should bring that up with Joe Pine when we start talking about experiences. I can go forward, but I cannot go back. I have not.
You still haven't figured out how to do that. All right. We'll have to talk later.
I will tell you one thing. 2 hours into my 14.5-hour plane trip from Doha to New York, New York's JFK, I was begging for teleportation, but it has not happened yet. So we found out one more little fun fact about you. And
there's more.
Well, this one's a doozy, let me tell you, because first of all, I'll tell you what the thing is. You are an antisocial introvert.
Who told?
Exactly. Well, and so I had to go and look up a little bit, and this is where I see you fit in. So, like, I had to figure out who is my guest and where does he fit in on this particular continuum. So, I'm not sure. Is that true that you live between grrr and you preferring being in your head? But that's according to this chart.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty accurate. It's little known fact is that a lot of people like me that speak for a living, that do workshops, consult in front of people all the time, that we're actually introverted. And it doesn't mean that we, the antisocial part of it doesn't come out in that standpoint, but it's, but what it means is that you gain energy from being alone, right? You need alone time. And when I'm with people, it drains energy, right? As opposed to extroverts they're the opposite way, is that they drain energy when they're alone and they get energy when they're with other people. But so I've often said that over the past year with everything that's happened, as an antisocial introvert who works out of his own home office, it hasn't been all that different for me. But but I do miss the travel and everything that comes along with working with companies. But like, for example, we have one offering an experience accounting expert certification course that's 4.5 days, right? With dinners, some of those nights and everything. It's like at the end of that, I am just drained because I need some me time. So usually the first thing I do when that last half day is over is I go out and play golf, hopefully, preferably alone.
So do you find that like now in this environment where so much has taken place virtually and over Zoom, etc., has that been better for you ultimately, where you can have a bit of FaceTime, but then still detach afterwards and not feel,
No, actually, because I love traveling, and traveling is when I get the most reading done, right? When I'm on an airplane, I'm just reading the whole time. And it's when I get to experience things. So I'm here on Zoom and I do a speech for somebody, in some far-flung locale. I was in Iceland, one morning last week, for example. And then I go back to work immediately, right? Well, if I were actually in Iceland, guess what? I'd go to the Blue Lagoon, or I'd go to a glacier, or I'd check out the coffee shops. I'd see what escape rooms, what experiences are in town. And that I miss a lot. I mean, I do a lot of research online and everything, but it doesn't, you can't replace, experiencing it for real.
And I love how, you've brought up the concept of experiences that are maybe not, primary, but are ancillary or tertiary. They are not part of the reason you're there, but by adding them and surrounding yourself with them, arguably they enhance the actual product and the delivery. For example, on my way to my keynote today, I bumped into this person or went into a coffee shop, or, it
Right.
provides, I guess, that the magic word context, which you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Right. And there's also another factor is that all the experiences that I have, right? I'm paying an admission fee to go to these experiences. Well, guess what? I will then, any experience that I want, particularly if I paid a lot for it, I'll be sure to include it in some presentation later. There's always something you can learn, whether it's good or bad. And I'll often show up an experience like that, and then I'll say, but this actually has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But my accountant said if I showed it to you, I'd be able to write it off on my taxes. And I do. Life is research for me. Every experience I have, I write off of my taxes.
Listen, the next set of words from my mouth could be very dangerous and damaging because I think I've been successfully writing off purchases of Angry Birds and Clash of Clans, and basically, it's all part of being a digital thought leader, right?
Absolutely, it absolutely is. There's just no doubt.
All right, so now, as long as Joe Pine is my new accountant who will sign my taxes, I'm very happy about that. We're going to just put aside the experience economy, and I want to talk about just very briefly mass customization. It's one of the most important ideas, and that book was written how long ago?
It came out in late 1992.
So, okay, that blows my mind. Why? Because this is before digital, before at least
Right.
the proliferation of digital, where we spoke about, the 3 C's, but customization and personalization and CRM, all of this stuff was like, the rise of digital. And you're writing about the concept, not just of personalization and customization, but at scale. I would love for you to just talk a little bit about how you came up with this concept all the way back when. How did it come to you all the way back when? What was it that ultimately you kind of envisioned this, juxtaposition of these two things that are almost polar opposite? And in doing, I suppose so is social media polar opposite, right? social is what you and I are probably doing right now. Be better with a beer in our hands, and media, as you know, the old saying, neither television is so-called medium because it is neither rare nor well done. So you took these two ideas and you brought them together to bring something, to create something truly beautiful.
Well, I mentioned that I'm a nerd from way back, right? My dad was in the computer industry in the late 50s in Palo Alto. We were hooked up. We had a teletype in our home, and I started using, if you remember what those are, started using computers then. And so I actually joined IBM out of college, first technical jobs and managerial and into strategy and that. And one of my jobs for the AS400 mini computer, if any of your listeners or watchers remember that, was to bring customers and business partners into the development process. So I helped them come in and help us debug the software, convert their applications to them, get them available and so forth, and made a huge difference in the success of the system. But one of the things I learned there was that every one of those customers was unique. Every one of them was different. They wanted to use the system a different way, connect it with different hardware, put different data, software applications, and so forth on it. They were unremittingly unique. And we did not take that into account at all. And so from that experience, I moved into strategy. And there I read Stan Davis's book, Future Perfect. It came out in 1987. And he's the one who actually coined the term mass customization. And he did it, like you said, very much like you said, where he actually put a bunch of words that he cut up in little pieces and put them in a bowl and started pulling them out two at a time until something popped. And he pulled out mass and customization together and went, whoa. Right, that is an oxymoron. What does that mean? And so he wrote a chapter on it in his book, Future Perfect. I read that as a strategic planner, and it was like the heavens opened up and the angels sang. So I said, this is what we need to do. So I worked on getting that into our plans and strategies. And then when IBM sent me to MIT for a year to get my master's degree, I found out I had to do a thesis. So I said, I'm going to do a thesis on mass customization and turn it into a book. And that's where mass customization came from. So a full-length treatment that I did that I finished when I was back at IBM, and again published in late 1992. They really put meat on the bones of what this is, how you could go about it, what the key things were, and why it was so necessary today. Because the system of mass production, even back then, you could see that it was basically falling apart and wasn't going to meet people's individual needs.
I actually, when I came to the US in 1997, I worked on IBM and actually remember it very well. There was the RS6000, the AS400, and PC Server. Those were the three products that we worked on as part of the small medium business group. So I remember it fondly.
Yes.
Well, there are two parts. There are two parts to it that I find really quite intriguing. The first is this randomness, which is like, I suppose it's almost like for anyone that needs a muse or to be inspired or has writer's block, just take a whole bunch of those, bingo, bullshit bingo words, stick them in a hat, pull two out, and see what sticks or what clicks.
Right, exactly.
So I found that fascinating. By the way, what I should have said was bull. Bingo. I forgot that I have my my sensor board here. So that's amazing. And then, but more importantly, I had a guest on the show, and he said corporations are broken at scale. And he said at scale, cracks become chasms. It is the words at scale that really just corporations can't seem to get right, especially when they're thinking about humanity and authenticity. So in your opinion, from what you've researched and studied and written about, how does a corporation figure out authenticity at scale, humanity at scale, customization at scale?
Well, there's a couple of things. So on the customization side, the key to mass customization, to efficient, high volume, low cost customization is in fact modularity. When you think of modularity, think of Lego building bricks. And what can you build with Legos? Anything you want. Why? Because you have a large number of modules, different sizes, different shapes, different colors, and a simple and elegant linkage system to snapping them together. Right? That's what modularity is. And it enables you to, by just picking out different parts of different Lego bins, whether those are physical components for a physical good, whether they're service activities for a service, whether they're elements of an experience, you put them together in different ways for different customers. In many ways, organizations should be built on a more modular basis too, so we can attack any problem today by bringing together different constituent parts of the organization to be able to do that, versus the monolithic functional silos that exist with the mass production organization, which is where you really can't do anything much at scale except the same thing over and over and over again. Right, and mass customization breaks you out of that and allows you to do different things for different people. The other thing I'll mention is I'm actually working on some new ideas that are the primary brainchild of my colleague Kim Korn, who co-wrote Infinite Possibility with me. And he's been working for over a decade on how can companies thrive forever, right? That's the basic question. Right? And this is the problem with once you get that scale, that the companies tend to fall into mediocrity and eventually fail. And how do you thrive forever? How do you continually innovate faster than your ecosystem to have a competitive advantage that regenerates over and over again? And Kim calls it regenerative managing. And we've identified these 7 principles of regenerative managing that every company needs to have in order to think about just constantly thriving forever. Not that there isn't up and downs, but you never get on that path to failure. And one of those relates directly to authenticity as well, which is that you need to have a meaningful purpose. You need to have a raison d'etre about why you exist in the world beyond making a buck, right? That money should never be the purpose of any organization, but rather it's the measure of how well you fulfill that purpose. And so, and when having a meaningful purpose is one of 10 elements that we identified in our book on authenticity as well, where the basic construct, it's one of 5 elements of being true to self, right? There's 2 key standards of authenticity. Are you true to self, right? As a company, are you true to self? Do you follow your heritage? Do you live up to your purpose? Do you live out your values and so on? And then the second key standard is are you what you say you are, right? And here's where marketing comes in, because marketing is often a phoniness generating machine, because advertisers and their complicit marketing agencies can't help but exaggerate what they are. And so you get where they get perceived as phony because they say things about themselves that are in fact not true. And most large organizations, they in fact corrode from the inside out when top management starts doing things and saying things that does not live up to the espoused or tacit values of the organization.
Well, we have to talk separately about the new book that you're writing, because I don't know if you know this about me, but my most recent book, my 5th book, is called Built to Suck: The Inevitable Demise of the Corporation and How to Save It. And we really have to talk. But one of the things that I actually talk about, and obviously juxtaposed with Built to Last, Jim Collins' book, where he talks about the tenets or the characteristics of visionary companies. And he says, well, companies are not always going to stay visionary companies. And if they lose some of those characteristics, that's when ultimately they fail. But one of the things that I came up with after the book was published is, and it's a principle that I came up with called heresy, which is, are you prepared to fire yourself, to put yourself out of business? And there are all these 10 heresies. But one of them comes down to this idea of there should be term limits on corporations, after which they should, and then I came up with the 3 Ds. They should either be dissolved, in other words, dissected, broken up into smaller pieces, or disrupted. And I felt like that became the continuum, which is the worst case scenario is absolutely close shop, cut your losses. But the thriving forever, which is an interesting concept, has to come from constant, you call it regeneration, right, reinvention, transformation, right, evolution, adaptation, all of the above. That if it doesn't come naturally, culturally, it has to come through some shocking the system or catharsis.
Right, and what usually happens is that some heroic leader comes into the company and saves the day. And you think of Jack Welch at GE, for example. but never puts in the systems in place, never puts in the way of managing to get that company to thrive forever, because then after you're gone, it just sort of falls back down again. And that's where dissolution, right, has been a large answer for GE over the past decade or two.
So now Ahmed Yamin is saying hello from the Maldives. Ahmed, if you're looking to bring Joe Pine and Joe Jaffe out to speak at an event in the Maldives, we will gladly make the trip. Will we, Joe?
Yes, assuming that a Chinese rocket isn't coming back down again at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think did it fall close to the Maldives?
It fell close to the Maldives, yes.
Really? I thought actually at one point it was they were saying New Zealand, but anyway, Ahmed, we hope you're okay. You must be okay because he's watching the show. So we'll touch very briefly, and then we'll spend the remaining time we have on the experience economy. But another word, authenticity. I mean, that word has been used and overused and abused in circa 2018, 19, 20. Start with why, purpose. Everyone's been all over it, and you identified this word as well before it was a thing, before it became another entry on the bingo board.
Right.
But you mapped it to, amongst other things, as you said, purpose, and also this idea of be true to yourself and be who you say you are. What was it about authenticity that then you could see was going to become such an important part of our business ethos?
Well, it actually came out of our work on the experience economy, because whenever we talk about experiences, people just naturally bring up this topic of authenticity. Particularly, I became a visiting professor at the University of Amsterdam, and there the Dutch would always bring up. They ever got to Q&A time, they would have a question that was really more of an accusation, and always began with the same two words: "You Americans." Right? They'd say, "You Americans, you like your plastic, your fantasy, your Disneyland experiences, whereas we Dutch, we like our natural, authentic, our real experiences." And it sort of amazed me, because this was coming from a people that live in a land that is every bit as manufactured as Disneyland is, right? Because there isn't a square meter of ground in the Netherlands that hasn't been moved, modified, or manicured to look as if it had always been there. It's the only place I've ever gone for a walk in the woods, and all the trees are lined up in rows. And yet they had this desire for authenticity. So what we figured out is that as the world became more and more of a paid for experiences, that people increasingly question what is real and what is not. And increasingly, they don't want the fake, the real. They don't want the fake from the phony. They want the real from the genuine. And so companies have to manage those perceptions of authenticity and get people to perceive their company, their places, and their offerings as authentic. It's basically, we call it the new consumer sensibility for today's experience economy.
And I suppose, I mean, that's the thing with culture, right? Culture, when you're on the inside, I mean, I think about a company like Zappos, and I mean, people would go and visit their HQ like a tourist attraction. I went there. I was in Vegas for CES. And I got in a car, and it was about like 35 or 40-minute drive, and I ended up going on the Zappos tour and just being enthralled with this company, sitting on the throne that they had, their customer throne, getting a photo taken. It felt like Disneyland, but I suppose, to the outsider, or certainly someone that struggles to embrace those values, it could be, to your point, seen as over the top, obtuse, inauthentic, when it's the exact opposite.
Right, exactly, because it is who they are, and it is the culture that they have created there. Doesn't mean you're vanilla. You don't want to be like every other company. You want to be who you are.
So now let's get into the book that certainly it was a Bible. I mean, there were books to me, like there was raving fans. There were books that I read, as a marketer, starting out in my own career, that were and going throughout my career, that just were these stakes in the ground. And the book was written, also before before everything else, before virtual reality, before hybrid, before, even events became a thing, like these massive activations. I would love for you to set up the original experience economy, and then we'll kind of talk about what's changed and what hasn't.
Right. So the experience economy, basically what it says is that we've gone from an agrarian economy based off commodities through an industrial economy based off goods to a service economy. And then back in 1999, when the original book came out, we said we are shifting into an experience economy, where experiences are becoming the predominant economic offering, that experiences are what consumers increasingly want. And that means that goods and services become commoditized, right? They're treated like a commodity, where people don't care who makes them. They're about the brand or the features are all pretty much the same anyway. They come to care about three things and three things only, and that's price, price, and price, right? That's when goods and services have become commoditized. So companies had to, in order to create differentiation, had to shift up into this experience economy, to staging experiences for their customers, right? And so you talked about the definition that you got from Wikipedia of experience, which is very true. And experience is this incredibly expansive word, right? It means a whole lot of things. But when we're talking about it, it is from a business perspective, an experience is an economic offering that engages, keyword, right? Engages every individual in an inherently personal way, and thereby create a memory, which is the hallmark of the experience. So we could see that more and more companies were staging these experiences, and that had become the predominant part of the economy. And the easiest way to see it is through an industry of coffee. Right? Coffee at its core is beans. It's commodities. You grow them on the ground, you extract them out of the ground, you sell them on the open marketplace. And farmers, if you convert the future price of coffee from a per pound to a per cup basis, farmers get about 2 or 3 cents per cup. Right? That's what beans are worth. But if you take those beans and you roast them, you grind them, you package them, you put it on a grocery store shelf, now manufacturers of the goods get 5, 10, 15 cents per cup of coffee. If you perform the service of actually brewing for a customer in a vending machine, a kiosk, a corner diner, bodega, 7-Eleven somewhere, now you're getting 50 cents, $1.50 per cup of coffee. But surround the brewing of the coffee with the ambiance and the theater of a Starbucks, right? And now how much are you paying? $3, $4, $5 for a cup of coffee that only has 2 or 3 cents worth of beans in it, right? So you see 2 orders of magnitude more value by turning it into a place where you have the coffee drinking, making, and then a drinking experience.
And because there is a Starbucks experience. I mean, I know this because we used to talk about this in my Nandos days. We called it, we focused on it. We invested in what we called the Nandos Experience.
Right.
And the word was very deliberate. And even when you walked into a Nandos, there was writing over the menu board that said, "Our quality is remembered long after the wait is forgotten." And what's so interesting is your definition, by the way, much better than Wikipedia. Did I even need to say that? But I love what you said. I mean, there are a couple of key things. I don't even have to look at my notes. You're talking about moments that happen, unique moments,
right?
At an individual level. Every individual perceives or experiences something unique. But the key word there is so much so that it creates a memory.
Yeah.
And so therefore the experience is memorable, and the transaction or the commodity is instantaneously forgotten or forgettable.
Right, that's exactly right, and that's one of the what I consider largely a bastardization of our concepts is the whole CX movement, because CX aims at making our interactions with customers nice and easy and convenient, which are all well and good. They're great, in fact, if you want to deliver a service, because that's all they get you is great, high quality service, and it's very effective for that. But if you want to stage an experience, then nice is nice, but rarely does it rise to the level of memorability. You know, and when you think about easy, what often happens when we say we want to make things easy for our customers, but we make them easy for employees to serve those customers. We routinize things, and that gets in the way of the individual uniqueness you're talking about, being inherently personal, right? Reaching inside of people and engaging them. And convenience is the antithesis of what I'm talking about. Convenience means let's get in and out as quickly as possible. Let's spend as little time with customers as possible. When with experiences, what they really value is the time that they're spending, right? 7-Eleven, nice, easy, convenient. Starbucks, in fact, it's actually a little difficult to get your drink, right? You order it over here, it comes out over there. When is it in the queue? You know, you got all this mobile order stuff going on, but that adds dramatic structure to it. And then you spend your time in the place. You know, services, if you think about it, are really about time well saved. Right, let's get in and out as quickly as possible. Spend as little time with the customer as possible from a company perspective. But experiences are about time well spent. The people actually value the time that they spend with you. And Joe, you mentioned Zappos a little while ago. Well, one of the things Zappos does, one of their great innovations, if you can call it that, is actually not measuring average handling time. Right, average handling time, the most all contact centers measure is how little time we spend with customers. We have to be productive. We have to get them off the phone. We have to put them in a queue. Hopefully they'll actually go away before they ever talk to somebody, because then we're more productive. Our numbers look better to top management. And Zappos says, forget that. We want a relationship with our customers. We want to spend time with them. We want to actually solve their problems. And so they don't measure average handling time. They've actually long celebrated the rep that got to spend the most time with the customer that day, where the record is 10 hours and 43 minutes, if you can imagine that. But that is a customer for life. That is a customer who tells hundreds of people, thousands, tens of thousands of people about their experience, will always come back to Zappos.
I mean, this is also, you could very well be discussing USAA as well. They adopt very similar and also embrace those ridiculously long phone calls, but inherent in the struggle for the corporation at scale, especially the infinite at scale, eternal at scale, right? The company that lives forever, is the ability to have to measure its measurement and metrics. And you know, I love what you said about CX and customer experience. In fact, you know, in Built to Suck, I used the term, I said, customer service is dead, customer satisfaction, customer experience. You know, I mean, customer satisfaction comes from the word satisfactory, for God's sake.
Right.
I use the phrase customer obsession, which is something that Jeff Bezos had used initially. How do companies get over this challenge, which is, you know, the need, especially at scale, to have to measure everything and create those standards?
Right. I mean, measurements are always looking in the past, right? They're rarely real time. We need ways of measuring things in real time. I'll give you a quick, perhaps apocryphal example, but it said that the way Walt Disney always measured the experience at Disneyland after it opened is at closing time, he would go to the front gates and walk into the park and look at the smiles on people's faces. And he wanted to right, what's the ratio of smiles to non-smiles, right? There is a measurement that makes sense with experience. It's not about satisfaction or even loyalty. It is, again, about engagement. It's about that emotional response to what you're doing and how engaged are your customers in the experience that you stage.
Absolutely love that example, and generally love anything associated with Walt Disney and that brand. I always come up with a quote for my guest, and I think this is the most appropriate time to bring up this quote. No man, obviously, this was done at a point where every quote was, you know, gender specific, but no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. And that was not Walt Disney, but it's and this man did not work for the Disney Corporation. This was, in fact, Tom Morris, one of our regulars, would approve Heraclitus. Very philosophical, but I think that's the point, right? The point is no two people are the same. Everyone is different. And it's
Exactly.
the ability to recognize the fluidity of humanity.
Right. And then, you know, and that gets into, you know, actually how I originally discovered what we call this progression of economic value from commodities to goods to services and experiences is my original work on mass customization, where I recognized that customizing a good automatically turns into a service. And when asked, what does it turn a service into, right, said it's customize a service automatically turns into an experience. Because if you design a service that is so appropriate for this particular person, exactly the service that they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but make them go wow and turn it into a memorable event. So customization is really at the DNA of how you shift from each of these economic offerings up this progression of economic value.
So I want to make a quick point before we go on to, you know, present day, which is, you know, when you talk about the original subhead, it's very, you know, it's very near and dear to my heart, because ultimately, you know, what you're talking about is when you say work is theater and every business a stage, you're talking about the essence of a performance. You're talking about the antidote to Zoom fatigue. You know, it's very prophetic. You're talking about the fact that you don't have to bore your employees, you know, and your customer into learning,
Submission.
you know, exactly. And I mean, I don't, you know, like in a way you could have been writing about 2020 and 2021, all the way back when, which is the ability to, I mean, it is transcendence, right? It's elevating and separating from the mundane. And then of course, what you've done is you've continued to, you know, evolve even the thinking. And now you're talking about competing for customer time, attention, and money. And I would love for you to just chat briefly about the evolution and the continuum, right? What changed from your first edition to present day? And then secondarily, how do you differentiate between these three concepts: time, attention, and money?
Well, one of the key things obviously changed is the rise of the internet. You know, it was in its infancy when we wrote the original experience economy, and now we recognize that it's been the greatest force of commoditization ever invented. You know, the frictionless marketplace means customers can instantly compare prices from one vendor to another and tends to push them down to the lowest possible price. And what you've seen over the past year is, of course, is that people have been have bought so much over the internet that we've taught people that they could use the internet to get goods, to get services, and have all that done for us, which actually frees up more time to have the experiences that we want. For the past year or so, it's been a lot of digital experiences. We've gone from physical to digital, from out there to in here, from social and communal experiences to very personal, individual, and familial experiences. But we do want to have those experiences again. And what we recognized with this re-release last year of the experience economy is that, you know, back then it was a nascent, a forthcoming, and emergent experience economy. Now it's here. We are in the experience economy, and this is what people want. In fact, people want goods and services to be commoditized, to buy at the lowest possible price and the greatest possible convenience, in order to spend their hard-earned money and their hard-earned time on the experiences that they value. Again, it's that time well spent. So that's to recognize you're competing for customer time. Is that we only have, it's the currency of experiences, and we only have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to experience it. We got to fit sleep in there sometime. It's like what Reed Hastings of Netflix says, that his number one competitor is sleep. Right? That's his competitor, because everything they do is an experience, and if they're sleeping, then they can't be experiencing Netflix. And there also is this grab for attention, is that you have to capture people's attention. And the number one competitor for attention today, of course, is the smartphone. That you can instantly drop out of any experience you're in by picking up your smartphone and start scrolling through it, because of all the experiences that you can have there. And so you have to be better than the smartphone. You have to be better than that to grab people's attention in your experiences. And money, as I mentioned earlier, really is the measure of how well you fulfill your purpose. And one of the things we did in the new edition is we introduced a new measure for experience stagers. So another way of capturing the value you are providing. We talked about smiles before, but we call the money value of time, or MVT. And the money value of time is the expenditures per minute that your customers are willing to pay you for. And you think about it, good standard is a movie, right? We all know what movies are. We all go to movies at least occasionally, or we used to. And a movie standard cost in the US might be around $12. They're around 2 hours. Well, that works out to exactly 10 cents per minute. All right, that's a good experience. You get 10 cents per minute. You think about going to a Starbucks, you're not paying an admission fee, but you're paying for the coffee. You spend an hour there, well, guess what? You just spent around 5 cents per minute. That's what a Starbucks experience is worth. But you go to Disney, it's 20 cents per minute. And so they're a double of what movies are for much more time, obviously, so they get much more money out of it. Plus, they get even more in F&B. They get more in goods as memorabilia and so forth. But their admission fees are basically their MVT of 20 cents per minute. Well, guess what? There are now, because of the rise of the experience economy over the last 10 years in particular, so many new experiences that explode that escape rooms and the Museum of Ice Cream and the 29 rooms and all these different Meow Wolf, all these Instagrammable places, all these immersive art experiences and everything are getting 40, 50 cents per minute. And it really says that the sky's the limit of what you can charge for if you create something that's worthy of that admission fee. And when I say the sky's the limit, I mean that literally, right? If you look at Virgin Galactic and charging $100,000 for 8 minutes in space, well, guess what? That's almost $2,000 per minute. Dollars, not cents, $2,000 per minute. So we're talking many orders of magnitude of the normal experience, right? Sort of a once in a lifetime, out of this world experience, but people are willing to pay these amounts if you give them the experiences that they crave.
I'm completely smiling from ear to ear because there is like so much, I would say, like similarity and some almost simpatico with thinking. I came up with a concept that I called QVT.
Okay.
You call it MVT, and QVT stood for quality voluntary time. But also, I reckon that the only universal metric is time. If you think about it, and QVT, the reason why I created QVT was it's like if you think about UI or UX or when designing a website, it's just someone that spends the initial assumption was someone that spends 10 minutes on your website is more likely to be favorably predisposed to you than someone that spends 1 minute. Someone that spends 10 minutes in Costco or Trader Joe's or Stu Leonard's is an even better example, but it has to be quality as well.
Right.
Because
the way I say that is the more time people spend with you, the more money they'll spend as a result.
Right. And of course the little asterisk, as long as it's not, waiting for service or
right, in a queue, on the phone.
But I have to say, so I've had two previous guests that love, adore, and worship you. By the way, one is Matthew Sweezy, and the other one is Max Lenderman. And I'm sure that they're watching and their ears lit up when they knew you were coming on.
They're both terrific. I've long said that Max Lenderman has the best book on experience marketing out there.
Right now he's clipping this and he's putting it on his reel.
Oh, he knows I said that. So yeah.
No, he was terrific, and when your name came up, as it often does, I was like, he has to come on my show. I think in the like remaining 1 or 2 minutes that we have left before I never mind turning into a pumpkin, I'm about to face plant on a pumpkin.
Right.
When you talk about the rise of experience platforms, I would just love to get a sense from you as to, where is it all heading? What does the experience economy look like in 2030? Are we going to see significant more technology, virtual reality, or are we going to maybe kind of do the exact opposite and return to basics?
Yes, absolutely. That's the thesis of my book on Infinite Possibility, that talks about all of the myriad ways that we can engage people using technology Everything from augmented reality and virtual reality to alternate reality and mirrored virtual reality in all these different ways. But it never takes away from the real. That reality itself will always and forevermore be the richest of experiences. And so you have both of those going on. But increasingly, whatever the experiences are, whether they're real, whether they're virtual, whether they're hybrid, they're increasingly purchased on platforms. And I'm doing a multi-client study right now with the Platform Strategy Institute on experience platforms and how we buy experiences. You most readily see that with like Airbnb, that you don't just book a sofa or a room or a house, you book these experiences with it, where you go for a local bar hop, you take a painting class or a sculpture class, you go bird watching and whatever while you're there. And so you create all of these experiences that people purchase. You have millions of potential experience stagers out there, many of which have gone virtual over the last year, but they're ready to accept all the billions of potential experiencers that are out there, the guests of your experience, and platforms make that connection between them and allow them to discover, to book, and then to experience these.
Well, listen, all I know, if I know anything, besides the fact that I need to get to sleep, it is, it is the key word. We began with a soliloquy talking about the word perception. We discussed other key phrases like authenticity, but it was the word memory and memorable that to me becomes the ultimate litmus test for something that can transcend a transaction or basic motorized consumption. Will you remember it? And we all know those sayings, which is, what's the old line is, people won't remember what you said or how you acted, but how you made them feel.
Right.
And I think that hopefully people watching this, they'll take that away as well from you, which is the importance of experiences. And how do you know you're delivering an experience? It's something that they're going to remember and keep with them. And even to your point, Instagram, it's like, it's what's the Instagram to second ratio, like the cost per second ratio. Before we go, and before you go, there are a bunch of things that I think we can share with people. Number one is, of course, buy or rebuy the Experience Economy. Get the whole set. How many different covers have there been?
Three. We did an updated edition in 2011 in addition to this re-release here.
All right, so buy all three, please, because it is a set you're going to want to keep because you will remember it. Number two, take the experience. What?
I was going to say they're all right there. There's the newest one. There's the original one. It's hard to do this. And then there's the updated edition.
I like it. And there's also 3D figurine somewhere there
That's
as
right.
well. Take the Experience Economy Expert Certification course. Tell us a little bit about this course.
Well, this, as I mentioned, is the 4.5-day immersion in the experience economy. You get all the ideas, all the frameworks, principles. You get workbooks. You get all the files, and we've had over 300 people certified in the experience economy around the world that are out there proselytizing in their industries and their companies and so forth. And we did, because of what's gone on the last year, create a virtual version as well. That's 5 half days plus a pre-session and a post-session as well that people can take. And it really does set you up to be an expert, to actually use and apply these ideas in your company or for your clients. And
I'm just getting word that the 2022 certification course will be taking place in the Maldives. So we'll see you there. I'm signing up as we speak. And then finally, register for on-stage frontline video training. So tell us about the specific.
Yeah, this
training.
is geared for anybody that works directly with customers. We geared it for people like in retail, in restaurants, fast food, whatever. But we've had a lot of professionals take it as well to recognize that there's so much value that they can learn And it really is based off of what you said, the fact that work is theater at every business stage. So how do I perform on my business stage, whatever the business might be?
Love it. You know, we had Brent Menswar on the show a couple weeks ago, and he spoke about the difference between presenting and speaking. He said, and he said you can count the people that are speakers on maybe less than 2 hands, but everyone else is presenting. If you want to work with Joe and find out about the amazing, some of the amazing stuff that we've discussed as well, just go to strategichorizons.com. If you want to connect with him on LinkedIn, just look up Joe Pine. There's only one Joe Pine that you need to be aware of. You can connect with him on Twitter. He hangs out in Clubhouse from time to time. And in fact, we might have done one tonight, but I think Joe has very kindly allowed me to rain check. And just look out because, you know, maybe we'll do something in Clubhouse in the weeks ahead.
Absolutely.
Joe, thank you for coming in. My God, the time flew. The time just absolutely flew. And I hope you'll come back when the new book comes out and we can continue the conversation.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate the opportunity here.
It was really amazing. And we always end off with the Grand Marshal of the show, Mr. Chuck Norris, who gets to tell us whether the guest sunk or swim. And the answer is?
You are Chuck Norris approved.
And there you go, in case there was any doubt whatsoever. I will see you guys tomorrow with Natalie Nixon. Joe, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.